Hello everybody and welcome back to Lester Loves Watches. There's been so much talk about modern Rolex in the last month or so with the new 2020 releases. And in fact, for the last 5 years, people have been going on and on and on about the latest things that Rolex are producing, if not necessarily selling. But let's think about the back catalogue of Rolex, which has some wonderful examples of watches stretching back to the 1960s and 70s. I'm a great vintage collector. My most modern watch, I think, is early 2000s, and most of my watches are 1960s and 70s. And here we've got two great examples of what Rolex was doing in that decade, in the 1970s. So first of all, we have the Rolex Datejust, and this is the reference 1601, because it has the white gold bezel. And if that was a stainless steel, it would be a 1603. Now, if I angle the watch, note the dial, which is a linen dial. So you can see those little lines running up and down it, which just gives it a little bit more interest than a flat dial or a sunburst dial. And the things I love about this watch are the proportions, the dial, and the dependability, really, of this watch, which is 50 years old. It runs like a tank. It hardly misses a beat, and it's just suitable for so many different occasions. It has superlative chronometer status. It's got its jingly jangly jubilee, which, as you can see, is pretty stretched. But overall, it's very nice condition. The coronet there, upside down, is not too bad. I mean, it's had a few polishes in its life, but you can still see that there. It's not the best example, this watch, but I got it for quite a good price at an auction house in London. In fact, it didn't even sell at the auction, so I went to the auction house afterwards and struck a deal with them. But there we are. That's a lovely Datejust there. Now, this one on the right is much more interesting. Now, aficionados of Rolex will immediately spot what this is. Not so aficionados of Rolex might say, oh, it looks like an oyster quartz, doesn't it? But then you look at the second hand and you think, oh, that can't be an oyster quartz. It's not ticking at 1 tick per second. So this is the desirable and famous Rolex 1530. So it has an integrated bracelet. It has the oyster quartz case, but it has an automatic movement. 1570 caliber. And so the story goes, in about 1975, Rolex started producing this watch. They had made the cases that eventually the oyster quartz watches would go into. And it's not quite clear to me whether they had too many cases and not enough quartz movement, so they had to put some other movement inside the case, or whether indeed they were testing the market with the case. So they were thinking, right, well, let's not annoy the traditionalists. Let's give them an automatic movement in the new style case, which we will be using for quartz, see how it sells, see how they get on, and then as long as nobody really hates it, we'll then start putting the quartz movements in. I don't know which of those, if any of them, actually happened, but it's nice to speculate. So it has beautiful angles, traditional, really, sort of Datejusty shape there. But look at that lovely sharp angle on the case as it goes into the integrated bracelet. If you compare the Datejust and this one, the shape is quite similar, except that obviously on the Datejust you've got the end link going into the case, and on this one it's all metal. It's all metal of the case. This one also is superlative chronometer. These 1530s tend to go a kind of light umber color around the dial. If you see one which is very sort of cream or not patinaed at all, you've got to ask yourself whether that is the original and it's just been hidden away really carefully, or whether it is in fact a replacement dial. This one I'm pretty sure is not. It's starting to go, but it was very nicely kept as well. So yeah, so they came out in 1975, discontinued in 1977 when Rolex started putting the oyster quartz movement into these cases, and over those 2 years, probably less than 1,500 examples were actually produced. So if you think of the number that have bitten the dust since then, this watch actually is fairly uncommon. You can get them on Chrono24. There aren't very many in the world every time you search. So it's that kind of rarity. Look at the rehaut as well. That deep rehaut there. Gorgeous watch. 36mm. Although it's called a date, which traditionally is what, 34mm? 35mm. This is actually 36mm, even though it's called a date and not a Datejust. So there we are. Whoops. Now moving on, let's take away these two beauties and talk about the third vintage Rolex that I have in my collection. Right. You all know what this is. You can tell by the small date, no Cyclops. Oh, well, it says it on the dial, doesn't it? Rolex Sea-Dweller, beautiful Rolex Sea-Dweller, 16600. So this is the longest produced Sea-Dweller so far, spanning, I think, from 1989 all the way to 2000 or the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006. This is a late one. Very nice condition. Hasn't had too much of a polish. Still got nice sharp edging there. Again, a rock solid watch. It's got the sort of slightly old-fashioned clasp, really. So yeah, this I treat this one with care. It's not a daily bisa or anything. I take it out occasionally and wear it. There's the helium escape valve there. Lovely proportions though. This is, by the way, this is pre super case, pre maxi dial. You've got the nice tapering lugs, which Rolex are going back to now with their 2020 releases. And I call this the last, really the last of the great vintage Sea-Dwellers, I think. You had the 666, which is also nice. The case is slightly wider, I think, on that one. But this is enough for me. What amazes me with these watches is they're not really appreciating that much in value. The price I paid for this a year ago is pretty much exactly the same as the price now. I've seen hardly any movement, and that could be because there's quite a lot of them. It could be because it's not one of the kind of big five that people always go for. It could be because it's a bit of a sleeper and that it will pick up soon. I hope so. Well, I don't really care, but I hope so. It'd be nice to think that I could get my money back or make a bit of money if I had to sell it in an emergency. So yeah. So let's put them all together. I'll do some wrist shots now, just so you can see what they look like. I've got a 6 3/4 inch wrist, about 17 centimeters just below. So, yeah, there's the Sea-Dweller. Very nice proportions, very comfortable. It's quite a high watch, nearly 15mm, but it easily goes over under a cuff. Very nice, that one. So now I will slip on the 1530 for you. Talk amongst yourselves, will you, just while I get this watch on. So, yep, here's the 1530. Perfect, really. Look at that, perfect size. If you had to like a 19-20 centimeter wrist, it might look a bit wee, a bit tiny. But with my wrist, it's absolutely fine. Beautiful thing. And then, you know, the Datejust is going to wear very similarly, but I'll slip it on anyway since we're here. And here's the Datejust. Again, beautiful proportions, glinting away. Lovely. So there we are. Thanks very much for watching. I'll leave you with these two and the other one's on my wrist. And yeah, don't shy away from vintage Rolex. Buy it from a reputable source. Buy it from somebody who's still going to be there in a few years and give you a guarantee. Make sure it's freshly serviced and you should be absolutely fine. Great watches, and they're really not going to lose that much money, and they'll probably gain a bit over time. So there we are. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.